Ever wanted to break out of your cubicle and into a business where you can call the shots? U-Break-I-Fix is looking for passionate self-starters interested in a franchise opportunity in the booming electronics repair industry. At U-Break-I-Fix, we help reconnect people to the devices that they rely on so that they can get back to what matters most. This is a big responsibility, and from the moment you join our family, our franchisees are provided with the resources and support to bring affordable and convenient electronics repair to your community. Did we mention that with amazing partners like Samsung and Google, U-Break-I-Fix franchisees also have access to the highest quality parts and personalized training out there, as well as specialized tools? It's true. And it's also easy to visit ubreakifix.com/franchising and learn more about your big break at your very own U-Break-I-Fix.
The Believe Podcast Network presents the FCS Football Podcast with Joe DeLeon.
Well, let's get fat.
And Sean Anderson.
I am a soothsayer. Well, welcome back to the Believe in FCS Football Podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network. I'm Joe DeLeon with my co-host, Sean Anderson, two former college football players at the FCS level, bringing you in-depth analysis on everything you need to know about Division I AA. Today's episode, we are going to be speaking with NFL draft analyst Ryan Roberts, who is also my co-host on the NFL Draft Prospects podcast, also a part of Believe. Check that out if you are interested. But Ryan at Rise and Draft on Twitter is joining us to talk about this really talented, unique, deep class of prospects coming out and that are going to be a part of the 2022 class for the NFL Draft. There's a lot of interesting names, and stay tuned for that. Before we get to it, though, I need to tell you about Bet Online. And right now, the NBA playoffs are just starting to heat up. Things are getting rolling in this first round. You might as well get on the action. You might as well make things interesting. Anything can happen at this point. If you think somebody's going to win a game that you're going to be tuning into, put a little money down, earn yourself some beer money for later on in the night or later on in the week. Make things interesting. And heck, maybe your team's not in it anymore and you just want to have a little bit of skin in the game. You can also do that as well by picking who you think is going to win in specific matchups. Maybe you want to have some fun and pick who you think is going to win the NBA Finals. Anything, prop bets, specific games, whatever it is, you name it, Bet Online has it. Bet Online has you covered for all the news, scores, and odds that you need, and it is the best way to place your bets, as well as free to sign up. Head to their website, betonline.ag, or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, your online sportsbook experts. Now joining the show to talk some of the big names in this 2022 NFL draft class for the FCS, a class that we've already talked up a bit. We're going to get to hear, hopefully, from a good chunk of those prospects. But joining is a friend of the show, Ryan Roberts, who's appeared once, now making that second time. It's also the first time that Ryan and Sean get to interact. So, Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. I was going to say, if Sean wasn't there the first time, does it actually count? But I appreciate you guys having me on.
Well, I'm the only one with the show podcast and all that in my Twitter bio, whereas Joe likes to pretend he doesn't do one show with me.
Sean, that's funny because
what are you talking about?
The podcast that me and Joe do, I always say that it's my podcast, so I'm certain now after hearing this that this is your podcast.
Thank you.
Well,
I appreciate that.
Ryan, to be fair, so responses to both of those things. Ryan, to be fair, if I didn't edit the shows and produce it, it would just be a bunch of recorded interviews in a Google folder. And then Sean, I do have FCS in the bio. I just can't fit at GTTP podcast in my bio. So I don't care about either thing, but FCS prospects, that's what I do care about. That's what we're here to talk about. Ryan has come out multiple times saying, and he said directly to me, that he thinks that there's going to be a ton of super talented players in this FCS class because of the amount of guys returning, amount of guys that have transferred down from big programs. There's going to be a ton of guys that get drafted, more than we saw for the last two cycles because of all these circumstances. So, Ryan, how would you describe this group overall for the 22 class? Like, what are some of the things that stand out to you?
Well, I think when you talk about what COVID impacted most as far as like NFL draft perspective is like 2020 class we were left with guys that just didn't have an opportunity. They didn't get their official measurables. They didn't get verified by teams. So we saw a dip. I think it was 13 total in 2020. And then 2021, it was a little different because 2021 honestly was very talented. We had guys like Spencer Brown and Dylan Radins and Trey Lance, of course. Like, it was a really talented group, especially up top. What hurt the group last year, though, was that all the quote unquote depth pieces that may have been drafted to, buoy that number from 5 to a respectable number, maybe 15, 18-ish type of prospects, was the fact of like, hey, they got the extra year of eligibility. They most didn't play in the fall. So why were you going to declare? You're going to play in the spring and you were going to play into the 2021 season. So that limited the depth. But I really do think that we lost the fact of like the top of the 2021 class was very talented. It absolutely was. It really was. I mean, when you really look at it, there was a couple high-level offensive tackles. There was the 3rd overall selection at quarterback in the entire NFL draft. It was a good group. This year, though, I don't think that the top's going to be nearly as strong as 2021, but I think what we have now been given is not only are there an influx of a lot of talented players that had to go back to school, but we're also seeing a lot of guys that enter the transfer portal. And the problem with the sheer amount of players is there's limited spots. Everybody wants to play high Division I football. They want to play FBS football. But the problem is when you have over 1,500 prospects or players, I should say, that are in the portal at one time, players are going to soon figure out like, I probably am not going to get an FBS offer. I'm probably not going to play here. So it might be in my best interest to go down to the FCS. So I think that there's going to be an influx of talent. I think that there is just going to be a lot of depth. I think there's going to be, we're talking, it's been down for a couple years. I think we could be talking about 20 plus guys that could be drafted in next year's class. I think that that's the type of depth we're working with.
Now, Ryan, there's a lot of depth, obviously. Now, I'm more concerned about the polish. And Joe and I, when we played, we were lucky enough to have 4 uninterrupted years where the schedule was basically the same all 4 years when it came to fall ball, off season, spring ball, summer workouts. That was the repeat for 4 years. Now, everybody in the classes below us has had their whole world shaken up. We had big gaps in the off season. And it's hard for me to peg down whether or not I'd be more polished with all the extra practice and reps and all that, or if I would be colder given the lack of live bullets that I was facing in the season. How much of an impact did the long offseason, do you think, have for the current FCS prospects?
I don't think too much if you play in the spring, because the way I look at it is everything just got shuffled around a little bit. If they were playing in the fall going into spring practice, then it's the same as, the season got canceled, so we're going to keep practicing now. If anything, they may have gotten more practice time preparing for the spring season, and now you're rolling right from the spring into the fall, which I think for the synchronization, I don't even know if that's a word, but like the ability,
I think it's a word.
I think it's a word.
We make up words on the show.
Synchronization from going right from spring into a fall, and the attention that these coaches have gotten, and the I don't want to say impact, but the consistency that they have maybe gotten in a larger scope, I feel like they may have actually gotten more attention when you really think about it. So I think it's just a reshuffling of things. I don't think that's going to impact it at all, to be honest. I think the only impact is we have seen, again, a lot of players moving from team to team, both on the FCS level, from FBS down to FCS. So I think that the troubling part for how they have developed as football players is they may be at a completely different school, at a different, a completely different program, learning a new scheme. So I think that's where the inconsistency might come. But I don't think so much of the scheduling of the events really impacted anything, because I think that would have actually given them potentially more practice time when you really think about it.
Yeah, and I think that more practice time thing, and it's something that we even touched on the Draft Prospects show, something that we touched on the FCS show more than once, is that this extended offseason has set up these guys to have more time to train and focus on their bodies. Now, the converse of that is things might be a little bit messy for a short offseason, coming off of being dinged up from playing in the spring to then playing in the fall. We'll have to see if that actually ends up happening. But this extra time to prepare, there's guys that we didn't even really know about that had really huge seasons. I think that, I'll keep saying it, Ivory Frimpong, who we played with at URI, somebody who busts his ass, that extra time helped him put up a couple 100-yard games and some really big statistical performances. So guys like that, I think, are going to continue to pop up. But speaking of popping up, This class, as you've said, doesn't seem like there's going to be a Trey Lance or maybe even a Titus Howard, who was a completely random first-round pick who we didn't really even expect. But there could very well be some highly drafted day 2 guys, like a Dylan Radunz, like a Spencer Brown, who end up having high impacts for some teams. So if you had to handpick some players, who would you say has the best potential to see themselves go early or maybe be the first guys off the board?
I think for me, it's 2 skill position players. I think one is Christian Watson from North Dakota State, who is listed at 6'4" in the North Dakota State roster, averaged over 20 yards per catch in each of the last 2 seasons. He was Trey Lance's main guy. He's that vertical stretch guy. He's a legit low 4.4, maybe 4.3 athlete. Like he is that. I mean, he's dusting every defensive back that he is going against, and he has that long frame, which I think NFL teams are really going to get excited about because, there's some guys that have this great long frame that can win contested catches. There's some guys that create their separation with their foot speed and foot quickness. For me, Christian Watson has a good mixture of everything. So I think that he's a guy that second rounds I could buy into. Third round, I can absolutely buy into it because I think he's going to test really well. He's been very productive. The only problem with North Dakota State is some of these outside receivers do have somewhat of a limited route tree, so he's staying on the vertical plane of the field for the majority of time. So there might be a little bit of a learning curve when we're talking about the transition from, what type of route runner is he going to be? How nuanced is he in that part of his game? So I think that's the biggest question. And then another guy is, we talked about the transfer aspect of everything. Jatarvius Whitlow from Auburn was a guy that last summer I was excited about because I thought he had really good film at Auburn. And then all of a sudden, he transfers, ends up at Western Illinois, which was bizarre to me because I thought he was going to stay on the FBS because I saw him and I was like, this kid's good. Like, I think he's a day 2 potential player. Like, he's a really strongly built, thick lower half, contact balance, has better speed than you would anticipate, has better quickness than you would anticipate. And then he ends up at Western Illinois, which is, again, very bizarre to me. But when I'm talking about like a potential day 2 talent, I think teams are going to like him a lot. And he just, was basically just had a season off. So the tread on the tires that people talk about with running backs is going to be low. I think he's going to be fantastic in Western Illinois. I think he's going to carry that offense. He's a SEC talent playing at Western Illinois now. So I think that he has a chance to rise, a guy that people are going to forget about a little bit because, they're just out of sight, out of mind type of thing. But I think if you're asking me who are the couple talented guys that could make that ascension, I do think that Watson and Whitlow have a chance. And I think there's a lot of depth, but I think those are a couple guys that could ascend to potentially on day 2 somewhere.
Now, Ryan, we know that it's pretty rare to have a Trey Lance that goes number 3 overall, and then you normally get 2 to 3 FCS guys that go early day 2, maybe day 3. But normally FCS guys go 4 through 7 or UDFA. What other players are rounding out your, I'd say, top 5 to 6, aside from Whitlow and Watson, as some of the best prospects in this upcoming FCS draft class?
I think a lot of people are going to like North Dakota State right tackle Cordell Volson. I think that he's technically sound, probably more a mid to late day 3 guy because I think that he is not the most gifted athlete of all time. I don't think that his length is anything to write home about. But I think when you're getting into those types of rounds, you're talking about guys that could potentially be swing players, could back up multiple positions. Like I think that he brings enough of those intangibles that he could do really well in that role. Liam Fornadal from James Madison, who plays tackle for James Madison, is going to be a guard at the next level. I think he has a little bit something to him. Isaiah Chambers from McNeese State, who started his career at started his career at TCU. Then he went over to Houston, was actually Houston's leading sacker in 2019, but then he transferred just because the playing time wasn't what he thought it should be, and then he had a family issue, so he ended up transferring a little closer to home. So he ends up at McNeese State, and he had a really nice spring. One of the guys that I think really had a big boy in their abilities in the spring because he had like 7.5 tackles for loss and 14 TFLs and only like 5 games or something like that, like some crazy number. So I think that he did a lot for himself to help his case. A guy that is a little bit undershadowed to a degree because he plays on an Idaho team that has not been great over the last couple of years. But I like Trey Walker a bunch, the linebacker from Idaho, number 8 Christian Ellis was on this team, who was the son of Luther Ellis. I actually saw that he signed a UDFA deal, and I didn't even know he was in the 2021 NFL draft class. So I think that Trey Walker, I mean, the dude was averaging at one point like 15 tackles a game, really smart, instinctive football player. The question is, what type of athlete is he going to be? But, I mean, those are a few of the guys that really pop off immediately to me. Jaquez Ezzard obviously had a great end to the spring season in the championship game from Sam Houston State. So, I mean, there's a ton of guys, honestly. I could rattle off a bunch that I think have a chance to go somewhere on day 3. But, like I mentioned, Watson and a couple of those guys are the only guys I think have realistic shots on day 2. But I think that this could be a record-setting year if we're talking about day 3 players drafted by the FCS. I think that it is exceptionally deep.
Speaking on that depth, and maybe not the guys at the top, and you named a lot of really talented players. I think some very recognizable names for true FCS fans. But there are always going to be those sleeper guys. And I think the best example for the most recent sleeper guy, somebody who I didn't consider to be a sleeper, was James Robinson, who ends up being a UDFA, leads the Jaguars in rushing as a rookie, has a fantastic year, could have won Offensive Rookie of the Year if he wasn't competing against Justin Herbert and Justin Jefferson, but an outstanding first season. Do you see anybody like that might go undrafted or being maybe not as big of a name during the draft process, but could have some potential to turn into maybe not Offensive Rookie of the Year quality, but into a really quality starter or like a higher level starter, from the FCS?
Yeah, no, there's a couple of guys that I think kind of fit that description. I think next year's class has some depth at offensive tackle, especially. There's one guy that I'm super interested in, though, and I really want to kind of get a little further into his film, is Dylan Cook out of Montana. He was a quarterback at like Missouri something of the Mines, like some really small school out there, and he was playing quarterback at like 6'5", 6'6", and 280 pounds, 290 pounds, and then he transfers to Montana, and they settle him in at right tackle. So right now he's about 6'5", 6'6", 305 pounds, and moves really well for an offensive tackle. So he's a guy that I'm super excited about. I think that there's something good to him. I would have said that Trey Berry would be another guy that would have my attention, obviously, but with him transferring out of the FCS, I think guys like Elijah Dotson from Sacramento State, he's that kind of guy that I don't think anybody's going to talk about him much because like he's kind of a slighter framed running back, but like 2 years ago he had 70 catches. And when we're talking about that day 3 potential for some of these guys, it's about guys who can find roles and can find niches. For him, his niche is quickly going to be, hey, he's on third downs. He could potentially be a pass receiver. Can he do something in special teams? Like that's going to be his sticking point. And then the last guy is somebody that caught my attention last year, and I haven't seen anything what he did from this fall or spring, but DJ Coleman, defensive end out of Jacksonville State. The dude, 6'6", 265 pounds. He's got vines for arms. I was able to speak to DJ a little bit, and he is a really well put together, well-spoken kid that he understands what he needs to improve on, but he has some of those things that we call unteachables. Like you can't teach that type of length and that type of size. Like you either have it or you don't. And then he's a good athlete on top of it. Number 12 for Jacksonville State defensive end who had some nice production this year. Haven't sat down and watched the film at all, but he's a guy that for me might be a guy that could potential rise because again, that skill set at defensive end on the edge is things that the NFL clamors for because it's so important at that position.
Now, Ryan, as a former offensive lineman, it's always intriguing to me for the hearing anybody talk about offensive line is cool, but I got to know who they're protecting and who we should keep an eye out for the quarterbacks in this upcoming draft class that could be shaking it up in the NFL level.
Yeah, so a lot of fun. I've had the opportunity to really dig into a lot of the quarterbacks as the regional scout for College Gridiron Showcase. A lot of guys in that region actually intrigue me a lot. One guy, and I wouldn't say that he's the top FCS quarterback, but a guy that I'm really, really excited about is Trey Self out of Stephen F. Austin.
Yeah.
Kid is a former JUCO player who is listed at 6'4", only 190-something pounds, but he has a frame to put on a lot more weight. And how the NFL is going now with the ability to win off script and to win off platform and, to have a compromised base and still have arm strength to be able to push the ball a little bit. I think Trey Self has that quick flick of the wrist type of approach. He's a good athlete. I really do like a lot of what Trey Self brings. And then, the guys that people are going to talk about are Zarek Cooper from Jacksonville State, former transfer from Clemson. He's kind of been really up and down during his Jacksonville State career. Cole Kelly just won the National Player of the Year, who's a former Arkansas transfer who's listed at like 6'7", 260, which is outrageous side for a quarterback. And when you look at the historical data, quarterbacks that measure in over 6'6", not a very good track record of developing into anything, but he's a guy that obviously has a little bit of a pedigree. My favorite quarterback on the FCS level, an HBCU kid, is Aqeel Glass from Alabama A&M. I really like Aqeel. I think that he put together a really nice few games here in the spring. He's a tall, strong-arm quarterback who's well-spoken, who understands the nuances of the game. He doesn't put the ball in harm's way too often. I think that he's the kind of guy that day 3 selection possibly and could find a way to stick. Not necessarily a starting type, but in a backup role, I think he's got a chance. And then there's a lot of fun guys. Bryce Rivers from Northwestern State, who is, of course, related to Phillip Rivers. Eric Berrier out of Eastern Washington is a smaller dual-threat quarterback that has talent. EJ Perry from Brown, who I know is a Boston College transfer that I think you guys played against. So,
yeah, he was a pain in the ass.
Yeah, I'm sure he was.
Simple. I don't know if he could have had any more yards.
he's a nice dual threat. And I mean, even Dylan McCaffrey's playing at Northern Colorado next year. Of course, the younger brother of Christian McCaffrey. And then one guy I really want to mention, I didn't want to get off here without mentioning, is Asher O'Hara, who was a guy that was at Middle Tennessee State, who I liked a lot actually last summer. A lot as in, like, I felt that he had a nice dual threat ability. I thought that he had something to him. He just transferred to Sacramento State, which, of course, Kevin Thompson was a good player for them a couple years ago. So I think that he is going to do a lot of exciting things. And I think there's a lot of depth to the quarterback class. I don't think there's definitely no Trey Lance, but we're talking about day 3 developmental potential into UDFA territory. I think there's a lot of guys that are at least worthy of a camp invite, a camp look, a camp arm. Like, there's a lot of those types of guys.
Yeah, that's definitely what we like to hear, and I think that there could be some interesting names that could work their ways into some backup spots. Maybe we get a Ben DiNucci here or there from some of these players, but it sounds like there is a stupidly large crop compared to what we're used to seeing, because typically it's like maybe 5 guys and then some guys that are super fringe. And if any of them have a chance, it'll be like a CFL opportunity. But it sounds like there's some dudes that are going to get some rookie minicamp invites, maybe some training camp invites, that kind of stuff. Last thing that I want to hit you with, Ryan, we have some guys that we were interested in highlighting, but there's one specifically I want to talk about to wrap up the show. Somebody who's picked up a ton of steam lately. Somebody who is constantly being talked about. It seems like every outlet is writing a different article about something about this guy after what he did in the semifinal game and then the final game of the FCS championship. I'm referring to Jaquez Ezzard, the Howard transfer, who I didn't know until today when I saw an article published that he used to sweep up and clean the locker room at Howard to help out his team and help out the program. He ends up at Sam Houston, and he does all this crazy, stupid stuff in terms of how hard he is to tackle. We see all these cuts. We see this fluidity. You hear from people that coach him that have NFL experience saying, like, I haven't seen a guy move this fluidly, this well in a long time. What do you think of Jaquez Ezzard? Because I think he could have a lot of potential to make a name for himself this upcoming season. Hypothetically speaking, he doesn't try to transfer up, which I think that's a chance. If he's already transferred out of one school, he might consider doing it. So what do you think of Ezzard? I
mean, he's a lot of fun. He's for sure a lot of fun. Like you said, Howard transferred, played with Kalen Newton, the younger brother of Cam, there for a couple years. The numbers are stupid. Like, he's averaging over 20 yards a catch. And I think in this spring season, he was averaging over 30 at some points. So, I mean, obviously he was producing at a high level. He is a smaller framed, but kind of thickly built kid. I mean, I think he's listed at like 5'9", 190, but like he's pretty well put together. I think the biggest selling point to him, and you mentioned a little bit, is after catch ability. I think he has great field vision. I think that he sees things set up very quickly. He's the type of guy that, like, from a screen to just, something short and, quick arrow route or slant or whatever it is, like, you just want to get the ball in his hands very quickly and let him work in the open field. Like, that's kind of what he does well. And then you got some special teams background as well. So it's a good baseline. The trouble for the projection a little bit is we're talking short And I think Sean said this on your show last week, and I completely agree with it. I don't think he's fast. I don't. I think that he's smooth.
You misunderstood Sean because Sean said deceptive. Like Sean and I kept saying,
would you let the man finish his point? He definitely heard what I was about to say. Would you let our guest please speak? I'm sorry for him, Ryan. I apologize. Please continue.
It's okay, Sean.
No, I was just clarifying.
Anytime someone wants to agree with me, here comes Joe to have to go and just take the wind out of the sails.
Oh, stop it. No one wants to agree with you. Ryan wasn't agreeing with you. He was disagreeing with you. Ryan, go ahead.
Let's see.
I think that he has some deceptiveness to him. I would agree there. I think that he is a smooth kid that eats up grass a little quicker than you would think, but I don't think he's like straight line super fast. I think he's like a 4.5 kid. I think that he has enough.
That's not terrible.
It's enough to, be a threat in that regard. But when you're talking about a guy that isn't fast, coupled with the fact that he's smaller framed, I think we're talking about a guy that's going to probably make his living out of the slot, which is fine because, again, he's a yak guy, so he can do it there. Special teams is a big selling point for me, especially early on in his career, because there's got to be a way for a guy to stick. I think that's a sticking point for him. And then it's all about how much an offense, grows confidence in him to do those types of roles, and we've seen guys like the Harris kid from New Orleans Saints, who was a really good special teams player, really good punt returner, and now he's starting to get more involved with the offense. I don't think that Ezra is a apples to apples comparison there, but I think that is a slot underneath route runner that can break some tackles, has good field vision, all that good stuff. I think that he has a potential NFL future. It's just all going to be about what is the sticking point early on in his career.
All right, well, Ryan, that was all we had for you today, so really appreciate you hopping on and to talk about these NFL draft prospects. You probably will be coming on again soon. You have no choice because I manage your show appearances. That's how it works. But Ryan, also of the NFL Draft Prospects podcast, my co-host, as we have a ton of fantastic prospect interviews that Ryan does. Ryan is, and I keep saying this, easily the best interviewer out there. The show and the efforts that Ryan puts in, I think, is unlike any other draft show out there. Everybody else wants to hear themselves talk. Instead, we get to hear guys like Pat Surtain, J.C. Horn from this past cycle, and you've actually had a number of FCS guys that you've recorded with already that are going to run soon. So like Cole Kelly's one of them, Isaiah Chambers, you said. Who are some of the other guys, if you can remember off the top of your head? Because there's so many in the folder right now that I have to edit that I can't even keep track of all of them.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a couple of the main guys. Isaiah Chambers, Sean's favorite player, Cole Kelly, is on very soon.
Wait, actually, I don't mean to cut you off, yes. Ryan. So we do have to settle this. Okay. So is Cole Kelly a tight end or a quarterback?
I don't think he's a quarterback, Sean, so we've got to find a spot for him.
People didn't think Lamar Jackson was going to be a quarterback either.
Oh, yes.
You just compared Cole Kelly to Lamar Jackson.
That's a salad.
I'm gonna try and reach out to Cole Kelly. Ryan gave me his phone number. I'm serious. He's coming on the show, and Sean, I'm going to tell him that you compared him to Lamar Jackson.
Please do.
I'm going to do that.
It's just the historic. I know that some people don't like the data points, and I don't either, to be honest with you, in a lot of regards. But if you look up players of that height, I'm not even talking about the size because the 260 is nuts. But a player that is 6'7", any player over 6'6", let's even bump it down an inch. Historical data says they are not NFL quarterbacks. It just kind of is what it is. But I will say, Cole Kelly, I think, is a good athlete. I think he's 6'7", 260. Sounds like a tight end to me. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Okay, but before we wrap up, Did you mention the tight end thing to him when you interviewed? I haven't listened to the interview yet, so I'm curious.
I did it very backhandedly.
Really?
I said, Cole, I hear there's some people that may believe that you might be a tight end at the next level. And
you?
Yes, so me. But I didn't tell him it was me. And then he kind of laughed it off and said, no, I'm a quarterback. I'm like, I don't think so. But
that's right. That's the confidence I like, Cole. Keep it up.
Yeah, Tim Tebow also did that, so hopefully Cole Kelly realizes that he should give it a shot. Well, we've got a lot of cool interviews that we're going to get to hear on the NFL Prospect Show, so stay tuned for that. Sean, you got anything final for Ryan before we wrap up, the king of final thoughts?
Really, I'm just happy about seeing somebody in draft Twitter that is a real person. I hate the fantasy football league that we're in, but I'm excited to win it. It's just.
I think it's your pick right now, Sean.
Dear God, why is it 35 rounds?
Probably
why
is.
is it 35 rounds long? Who asked for that?
I didn't make the rules.
It's a dynasty league. We're in a dynasty.
What
I don't
does that
understand
mean?
it either.
What does that mean for me to
You
have
keep the
35 players?
They're yours.
Keep the players. So next season when we continue, you keep the
I don't
players.
get to cut
That's how
them?
it works. Oh, I'm on the clock,
You can
actually.
release them, yeah. But
Guys, do
You
you
know
think I should draft Gardner
I'm
Minshew?
cutting. If I have 35 players, I'm cutting 15 of them. It's too much. You guys can have my bottom 15 if you want.
okay. How about your top 15?
I don't know. What also with the rookie draft, what is that? I got Alex messaging me for a rookie draft and all this stuff. What is?
Why, does he want your pick?
4 rounds, you take rookies. That's all.
When does that take place?
After the draft.
Immediately after.
So we actually have 39 rounds, not 35.
Oh my God.
It's 39 rounds, yeah. Yeah, I didn't know what I was getting into, Sean. I'm sorry, but you're technically now a part of draft.
Yeah,
Twitter.
that's odd, but as long as Ryan's there, I know I can feel safe.
I appreciate that.
Feel safe. All right. Well, I think that's a good note to end on, Ryan. Everybody knows where to find you because I constantly retweet your stuff. But for anyone that doesn't follow me on Twitter, where can people find you on anything else you want to plug as well?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Believe in NFL Draft Prospect Podcast is a good thing to listen to if you haven't already, any podcast platform that you frequent. If you want to follow just the content I'm putting out, it's at Rise and Draft on Twitter. You can follow the stuff that I'm putting out from Coast to Coast Scouting or Expand the Box Score, as well as the work I'm doing with the College Gridiron Showcase this year. And I appreciate you guys having me on again.
Yeah, of course.
You're the
Ryan.
best.
Really appreciate it. Exactly. That's what I think, too. All right. Well, thanks again, Ryan. Make sure you follow us on social media at Joe DeLeon, at Sanderson Radio, at Believe Podcasts. Check out the Believe in NFL Draft Prospects podcast. Hit the subscribe button on that show as well as ours. 5-star reviews across the board. We'll talk to you soon, folks. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Get ready for your family and friends this July 4th. Start with Lowe's and an LG InstaView refrigerator and range. And after the party, leave the cleanup to a new LG dishwasher. Right now, get up to $750 off with the purchase of qualifying major appliances. Lowe's, home to holiday appliance values today and every day. Must add store to apply discount or enter promo code online at checkout. Can't be combined with additional discounts. Exclusions apply. Valid through 7/14, U.S. only.